There are only 3 kinds of roads at night. The ones that take you home, the ones that take you nowhere, and the kind that never let you leave, no matter how far you drive. I was trying to outrun one word, just one. Final. A single text at 2:03 a.m. that ended everything. When the GPS started glitching and the signs began changing their own names, I thought it was just exhaustion. I was wrong. The town that found me already knew my name, and it had been waiting a long time for someone lost enough to turn down its streets. Some roads don't just take you somewhere. Some roads remember you. Some towns don't stay on the map. They wait patiently in the fog until someone is broken enough to find them. Welcome back to Ethereal Echoes. Here, you'll find slow-burning psychological thrillers and atmospheric stories meant to be experienced in the dark. New episodes are released every Wednesday and Friday. And if you prefer to listen without ads and hear new stories early, you can join us on Patreon. For now, settle in, get comfortable, and let the world fade away. Tonight's story begins on a lonely midnight highway where a woman tried to outrun a single word, final, only to find a town that refuses to let anyone leave. A place where the clocks are frozen, your own reflection moves too slow, and every empty window already knows your secrets. There are only 3 songs on the radio after midnight, and none of them belong to me. The voice in my head is not mine either, but hers, or some garbled impression of hers, looping with greater clarity than any top 40 static. There's no point in singing along to the old breakup anthems. Every chorus reminds me that I am the only one left to harmonize, and my voice is less than a whisper over the tires. I had been driving for hours, or maybe days, chasing the midnight blur down a highway so monotonous I could believe it had no beginning. The GPS counted down in decimals, a digital heartbeat never in rhythm with mine. When I blinked, the dashboard clock screamed 1:41, time refusing to budge, as if the car itself was an oubliette and I, its slow, crumbling captive. Her last word had been final, as in final straw, final notice, final destination. She sent it by text at 2:03 a.m., though I only saw it at 4:12. I replayed it, lips soundlessly shaping the word, letting it thicken and clot until it filled my throat. She'd always liked things clean and simple, and I suppose there's nothing cleaner than a single word to end an era. But even then, I couldn't stop myself from applying question mark. I still hadn't heard back. Now, my only companion was the GPS, recalculating with a patient android indifference. Whenever I missed another recommended turn, The voice was preternaturally calm. At the next intersection, take the exit. In 1,000 feet, make a U-turn. Each instruction drilled into me like a dentist's Novocaine needle, puncturing, numbing, rendering the rest of the journey irrelevant. At some point, I stopped following the GPS out of spite, then out of necessity, as the roads grew less and less plausible. Google Maps routed itself into a maze of dash lines and phantom intersections, its map pin sprawling with the lostness of a cheap horror movie protagonist. The headlights caught nothing but mildew boards, collapsing mailboxes, and a forest so dense it seemed more like a wall than an ecosystem. It was on a straightaway, lined with haunted silhouettes of telephone poles, that I saw the first sign for Portreel. Though, that's not what it said. Not exactly. The sign was a rectangle of rusted metal, punched full of bullet holes, each letter pocked and staggering. P-O-T. Then, below it, in even crueler stencils, population 00006. That last digit, a 6, hastily corrected by hand from a 5. Beneath that, an afterthought, no outlet. I rolled past it with the engine throttled down to a low growl, the headlights struggling against a sudden curtain of fog. Behind me, the sign's reflection in the mirror kept dissolving into smeared streaks, impossible to read even with both eyes squinting. The GPS said nothing for 20 minutes. Then, stuttering to life with a cough of static. Turn right in. It cut off, as if reconsidering. Turn right. Turn right. I did not, and instead coasted forward until I found the next turnoff, an unlabeled sliver of asphalt barely wider than the car, bracketed on both sides by wild grass and gutted farmhouses. It was the kind of road that did not exist on any map until it was already behind you. The air grew thick, heavy, as if the car had been submerged just under the surface of a deep lake. On the radio, a soft hiss replaced all of the barest notes of the music, turning every melody into a funeral dirge. I pressed the accelerator and let the inertia pull me through the blackness, my body a puppet dangling behind the steering wheel. After some unknown distance, could have been a mile or the span of a breath, my headlights landed on another sign. This one, hand-painted letters, dripping like candle wax. Welcome to Portreel. Except, again, it wasn't quite right. A brown water stain made the second E bleed into an A, and underneath, someone had scrawled in red marker, Portreel, or maybe Portrelli. Each time I blinked, the spelling seemed to shift, the town unable to commit itself. The dashboard lights flickered, then died for a full second. the engine's hum replaced by an all-consuming hush. In that moment, suspended between one breath and the next, I saw them. A crossroads, illuminated not by my headlights, but by some sort of impossible fluorescence. Every direction was a copy of the one before, each turn indistinguishable from the next. But at the very center, a silhouette stood in the intersection, arms loose at the sides, face turned toward my windshield, posture neither menacing nor welcoming, just waiting. The light snapped back. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but the crossroad was gone. Only the unbroken road remained. My hands had tightened on the wheel so hard I felt the bones grind. The GPS, silent for what felt like hours, finally spoke, in a voice softer and more uncertain than before. Proceed to the route. Proceed to the route. Far below, in the valley that must have once been a river, a trembling light pulsed against the dark, a feeble imitation of civilization. Maybe a gas station, maybe a bar, maybe just the echo of my own wishful thinking. The town's entrance, according to the dashboard, was still 2.6 miles away. But the space between here and there seemed both endless and irreducible, as if the next second could never quite arrive. I don't remember making the decision to continue, only the weight of not having a choice. The car crested a final, nameless hill, and Portreel revealed itself at last, squatting in the mist like a bruise. I rolled down the window, half expecting to hear laughter, music, even the simple indignity of a dog barking. Instead, only wind, a metallic tang like old coins, and somewhere in the distance, the softest, most patient sound of something ticking. I eased off the brake, letting the car drift towards the town's heart. I had arrived, or so I thought. But the GPS, emboldened by the inevitability, whispered one final command. You have reached your destination. It lied. Portreel's main street was barely wide enough for 2 cars. Not that there were any contenders for the other lane. Storefronts huddled in 2 crooked rows, their display windows fogged from within, their hand-letter signs misspelling themselves in yellowed glass. I coasted the car down the center stripe, my own engine, the only sound for miles. The vibration of the wheels, a heartbeat transplanted to my wrists. It was not merely quiet, but paralyzed. No street lights, only the moon sifting through mist and telephone wires, lending everything the delicate blue of a post-mortem bruise. The houses, all soapbox and shotgun, sagging at the portrails, looked like they'd been constructed from memory, a police sketch artist's rendering of a place no one had ever visited. Every mailbox flag cocked at the same accusing angle. Every tire swing bound at identical heights by ropes grimmed black with lichen. Each lawn uniformly neglected, the yellowed grass all falling in one direction, as if a windstorm had frozen mid-gale and then abandoned them. I braked in front of the hardware store, Geckler's Supplies, the G and C half erased by time. Through the murky glass, I could see the neat rows of tools, hammers and axes and box cutters, glinting in a single unwavering line. Not a cobweb or a fingerprint in the place, but also not a single human ripple of disorder, not even a scuff on the linoleum or a scrawl on the community bulletin board. It was clean in the way a wound is when it first opens, fresh and wet and stinging. Next to it, the looking sharp salon, pink sign, letters painted by hands more optimistic than skilled. The silhouettes of mannequins wore vintage hats and wigs from 3 decades ago. Not a soul moved behind the counter, but the cash register's green glow told me the power grid hadn't given up yet. The pharmacy's clock stood out, bold, unblinking digits locked at 3:17. I checked my phone. Still 1:41. The GPS agreed, though the battery warning now pulsed in the corner of the screen. Hungry and malignant. I pressed a palm to my forehead, trying to wipe away the sense of being an extra in some demented dress rehearsal. No one came out to sweep the sidewalk, or bring in a flag, or even stare at the spectacle of my out-of-state license plate. I watched myself in the rearview mirror, expecting, maybe hoping, to see some evidence of mutation, but my face was the same face I had always had, pale, lunar, with a set of eyes too wide for their sockets, like a child's attempt at drawing a grown-up. I barred my teeth at my own reflection, a stupid, involuntary gesture. My lips looked blue in the dash light, and my left eyelid twitched at random, a Morse code for panic. It was the gas station that finally lured me to the curb. The sign read, Service Mart, though someone had, at some point, scratched out the E's, leaving only Cervic Mart. The fluorescents inside flickering erratically, lending the whole building the feeling of a UFO hangar or a derelict hospital. There were no cars in the lots, no bikes slung on the rack, just a single blue recycling bin overflowing with empty paper cups and the stubs of ancient receipts. I left the engine running, stepping out into a cold that hit with surgical precision. Not a general chill, but a probe, as if the air wanted to know my secrets. Fog curled around my ankles, licked the exposed skin at my wrists where my sleeves had crept up. The gas pumps still ticked off a lazy 0 on their LCDs. For a moment, I thought I could hear something else. Another car's engine, faint and distant, mirroring my own. But when I looked over my shoulder, the road was as empty as when I arrived. I slid through the automatic doors, expecting the sweet rot of old candy or the sour breath of antifreeze. But the store smelled of nothing at all. The shelves were fully stocked, arranged with pathological neatness, row upon row of canned soup, each label front-facing, bags of chips arrayed in colored granites, a whole wall of beer bottles, each perfectly aligned with the condensation unmoving, as if someone had applied it with a tiny, trembling brush. Even the floor tiles, white with a faded blue grid, showed no footprints or drag marks. I wondered if the place had ever been violated by actual commerce. I pressed my palms to the counter, feeling the unnatural chill of the laminate, and called out, "Anyone working tonight?" Nothing. The silence pushed back. I fished a Snapple from the fridge and tried to twist the cap. My hands shook. I scanned the aisles for a sign of life. A cat, a spider, even a fly. But the store was in a state of stasis, every object a prop in a scene waiting for its actors. On impulse, I dug into my jacket pocket for change, half intending to leave $1 on the counter as proof of my presence, a gesture of faith that this was not a waking dream. But my fingers found only the crumpled napkin from my last rest stop, her name and number still faintly visible where the grease had not yet obliterated them. I crumpled the napkin tighter and dropped it in the nearest trash can. It made no sound when it landed. Outside, the fog had thickened. The headlights of my car bounced off the pale wall, making my vehicle seem twice as large and more alive than before. I walked back to the car, and when I looked into the driver's seat, for an instant, I saw a silhouette waiting there, head cocked, fingers drumming the wheel in a rhythm that matched my own pulse. I blinked, and it was gone. I drove the circuit of the town 3 times, never encountering a single pedestrian or moving car. Once, a street lamp guttered overhead, showering the hood with a confetti of burnt moths. Another time, I saw the lights go on in a bungalow, the shadow of someone pacing past the curtain. But by the time I circled back, the house was dark again. The elementary school was last. Its swings hung like broken ribs over the dead grass. The slide warped and discolored by rust. I idled the car in the drop-off lane, headlights aimed at the double doors, and counted to 30. No movement inside. No sign that the world existed beyond the rectangle of my own windshield. A block past the school, I saw the sign for City Hall. The building no bigger than an old post office. Its windows barred by crossed plywood. The front door was cracked open, as if waiting for a guest. I left the car running, the headlights pooling in the rutted driveway, and walked up 3 steps. Inside, The dark was almost complete, broken only by a sliver of light from a room at the end of the hall. I listened, first for voices, then for breathing, then for any sound at all, and heard faintly the shuffle of papers, the click of a keyboard, a cough suppressed to nothing. I inched forward, heart thumping, the sound of my own footsteps magnified until it seemed the whole building would collapse under the weight. At the threshold of the lit room, I paused, hand on the door frame. The light was cold, a shade too blue, like an aquarium. Shadows moved against the far wall, spindly and elongated, their proportions off by degrees that my mind couldn't reconcile. I knocked. The sound, 3 hard raps, reverberated down the hallway, then died. Silence. Then, a voice, not quite human, not quite mechanical, called from the depths. Proceed to root. I stepped back, dizzy, and checked the clock on my phone. 1:41, unyielding, like it always had been. The dashboard of the car, when I returned to it, glowed with the same frozen digits. I could feel the town closing in, its vacant eyes following my every move, patient, eager for me to reach whatever end it had prepared. I gripped the wheel, took a steadying breath, and listened to the GPS as it whispered, "Proceed, proceed, proceed." And for the first time all night, I did exactly as I was told. It was the cold that finally drove me out to the car. A new breed of cold, thin and sharp, as if it had been engineered for maximum penetration. My hands numbed on the wheel, and each inhalation made my gums ache. Even the car's own heater, set to max, pumped out nothing but air already defeated by the night. I left the engine running and stepped onto the street, and that was when the silence changed. Not broke, just changed. Its molecules rearranged into something more absolute. There was a grocery bag sitting upright on the sidewalk, as if freshly placed there, the condensation still beating on the milk carton inside. Next to it, a child's bicycle, training wheels scuffed, seat bright plastic, laid toppled in the gutter, its front wheel spinning slowly, lazily, with no breeze to animate it. I didn't touch the bag. I didn't ride the bike. I just walked, my own footsteps too loud, like boots on a stage, past the hardware store again, past the school with its playground now blanketed in a pale blue-gray frost. The fog had lifted enough to see the town square, a lumpened mass of concrete and benches. At its center, a war memorial, a plinth topped with a statue of a generic soldier. What drew my eye was the wreath at the statue's feet. Fresh carnations, their color a violent red against the monochrome world. No footprints in the frost around it. No sign of a florist van or a grieving relative making an early morning offering. I moved clockwise around the square, not sure why. The diner was next. Grace Eats. The sign buzzed faintly, its neon tubes shivering through a filmy crust of dead insects. Inside, 2 booths, one empty, the other home to a single place setting. There was a slice of pie, crust still flaking, cherry filling glistening, a scoop of ice cream melting into pearlescent puddles. Next to it, a mug of coffee, steam rising in lazy whirls. I pressed my palm to the glass and felt the chill radiate through my skin, a sensation so absolute it nearly sent me to my knees. But what shattered me was the clock above the counter, 3:17. Always 3:17. I backed away, too fast, and almost tripped over the curb. On the other side of the street, the laundromat windows glowed with cheap fluorescence. Through the glass, washers spun in perpetual motion, clothes thumping in their drums, but no hands loaded or emptied them. Half-folded t-shirts and jeans lay in limp piles along the formica benches. A single sock, pink with yellow ducks, hung from the edge of a table, refusing to complete its descent. The toy store was next, a narrow storefront squeezed between the bakery and the barber shop. Its window display was a little off, a pyramid of games and action figures, but all the boxes were for toys at least a decade out of date, as if the store's owner had decided to curate only my own childhood. A note taped to the door, written in Sharpie, read, "Gone to lunch, back at 3:30. But of course, the clock above the toy aisle was stuck at 3:17. I almost laughed, but it came as a shudder. That's when I heard it, the first sound all night that didn't originate from my own movements. A shuffling, soft and irregular, like the hush of slippers on a carpet. It seemed to come from every doorway all at once, then from none at all. I pressed forward, toward the bakery. In the frosted window, trays of pastries lay perfectly arranged behind the glass, untouched and unsold. I squinted, searching for a sign of life inside, and as my breath fogged the glass, I saw, reflected, a figure on the far side of the street, standing motionless between 2 streetlights, as if nothing more than an upright smudge. But I knew immediately it was watching me. I spun, heart hammering, but the street was empty. No one. The shuffling sound had stopped. I looked back in the bakery window, and the reflection was still. My own face, yes, but wrong. Slower to move, slower to react, as if I'd become a low-res echo of myself. My reflection turned its wrist towards me, exposing the inside of its forearm. A long, pink-white scar snaked down it, a souvenir from the night I tried to save a cat from the neighbor's barbed wire fence years ago. I had almost forgotten about it, but my reflection wanted me to remember. A sound behind me, footsteps, deliberate and too close. I lurched away from the bakery, nearly slipping on the frost, and broke into a run. The footsteps followed, matching my tempo, closing the gap. I sprinted for the car, not daring to look back. My lungs burned. Every breath scalded me with cold. The engine's headlights painted my shadow long and thin over the asphalt, and for an instant, I saw the other shadows joining mine, multiplying, looming larger with each step. I slammed the car door, fumbled with the ignition, even though the engine was already running, and stopped the accelerator. The car fishtailed, tires screaming against the dead calm, before finding purchase and flinging me down the main road. I checked the rear view, half expecting to see the watcher again, but the street was blank. But as I sped away, the windows of every building seemed suddenly bright, and behind each one I glimpsed. No, not glimpsed, I knew. Someone was watching. Every pane a new audience for my escape. I had never been more certain of anything in my life. The GPS, silent until now, returned with a new directive, its voice softer, almost sympathetic. Proceed to the route. I obeyed. I had no other option. The car's heater never quite caught up. The cabin always a degree too cold, as if my body heat was being siphoned out of the pipe directly into the street. I drove aimlessly, letting the GPS decide, and I found myself back at the town square. Headlights stuttering over the benches, the memorial, the bakery, where my own reflection had glared back at me with unfamiliar scorn. This time, I noticed the flyers. They were everywhere, taped to the lampposts, stapled to the phone poles, pressed against the inside of windows. The same message, the same font, black and cheap and laser printer crisp. Community night every Tuesday. Bring a friend. In the corners, little smiling faces, drawn by hand, some with eyes, some with hollow circles, all the same, all slightly off. I pulled over and grabbed one, studied it under the dome light. The paper was heavy, damp at the edges, but the ink had not run. I rolled down the window. The wind had gone, but the cold licked my ears with more purpose than before. I stepped out just to prove I could and walked to the diner. Its neon sign hummed without mercy, a relentless pulse that pricked the air like a dentist's drill. Inside, nothing had changed. Not the pie, not the melting ice cream, not the single mug steaming its own eternity. But there was a wall of photos, Polaroids pinned and curling, stretching from counter to the bathroom door. My gaze caught one. Me, unmistakably, in a place I knew too well. My old apartment, the gray walls, the chipped counter, the peeling laminate floor. But the date scrawled in red ink was from a week from now. Below it, a note in my own handwriting. Repeat. I left the diner before the clock could tick. Back in the car, the rear view caught my face. But again, it didn't match. The skin too thin, the eyes darker, more intent. Behind me, a shadow sat in the passenger seat, just a shade lighter than the leather. When I turned, nothing. But the mirror never lied, did it? I drove until the streets bled into one another. Houses and storefronts morphing, repeating. Even the street signs now only with one word: proceed. I stopped at an intersection, unable to recall whether I'd passed it already. The windshield fogged from within, the defroster too weak. I swiped at the glass and saw, pasted to a bulletin board at the corner, a lost cat poster. The photo was of Murphy, my orange tabby who had vanished the week before the breakup. I read the text, lips numb. Missing, answers to Murphy. Please help. The contact number was my old cell, the one I'd smashed in a fit of post-final rage. The car filled with a low, subsonic hum, as if every building was vibrating in time to my panic. In every window, I saw shapes, my own sometimes, but sometimes thinner, sometimes heavier, sometimes a younger version in a hoodie, sometimes a wreck of myself hunched and ruined. Some pressed their palms to the glass, some mouthed words I couldn't hear. Sometimes I saw my old scar, sometimes it was a bandaged wrist, and sometimes they blinked before I did. This town was not haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by every possible version of me. But there was something else here too. A presence that was not a reflection. I felt it in the empty passenger seat, in the unseen hand that cranked the heat lower, in the persistent nudge of the GPS to return. Always return. The next block, I saw another version of myself walking down the sidewalk. Hunched, hands in pocket, head bowed. I tried to catch up, but at the stop sign, the figure was gone. Above, the street lamp buzzed and died, leaving the road even darker than before. I kept moving. There was nothing else to do. The voices of the GPS and my own memory braided together, a duet of command and regret, guiding me towards something I did not want to face. At the far end of town, by the school, a banner had been strung between two trees. Welcome, town record holder. Below it, a folding table covered in party hats and paper plates. No one waited to cheer. But I could feel it with perfect clarity that I was expected. I put the car in park, breathing hard, the engine the only living thing left. I closed my eyes and tried to remember a single day of my life that had not ended this way. The silence answered, "Repeat." The shadows in the windows nodded their approval. I gave them what they wanted: another lap, another circuit, another attempt to break through the invisible membrane that separated oneself from the next. I was the only population this place would ever need. I snapped. Maybe that's not the right word, but I'm not sure language is enough for what happened next. It started as a walk, fast, arms rigid at my sides, breath icing the air in front of my lips. My eyes darted to every window, every shadow, knowing that a new version of myself would be waiting. And I hated them all, every one of those potential lives, those failed rescue attempts, the wasted days and dumb choices. I ran, shoes slapping against the blacktop, each stride measured by the streetlights overhead. With every block, the lamps died, one by one, cascading behind me like dominoes of darkness. The air thickened, muffling my pulse, but I could still hear footsteps matching my own, then overtaking, then echoing so loud it was as if the entire town was running with me, or after me. At the end of the first street, I saw them, faceless figures, not empty but featureless, as if every detail had been wiped by a rough eraser. They stood at attention at the corners, 2, then 4, then 6. Each time I turned or veered off the main drag. Some wore my old work jackets. Some wore the jeans I'd left behind at apartments I tried to forget. I knew them all instantly, even without faces. I cut through an alley. The faces multiplied, spilling into the side streets, lining up at windows and doorways. Their hands stayed at their sides, never raised in a threat or welcome. As I passed, they leaned forward as if to smell me, as if confirming I was the right one this time. The buildings, too, began to change, their facades warping, swapping places, sometimes flickering from split-level ranch to laundromat to dentist office, as if the town couldn't decide which version to keep. The proceed signs hung everywhere, replacing stop and yield, and even the names of the roads themselves. On every telephone pole, new flyers this time, missing my face, the mugshot, a decade of haircuts stacked in a collage, the phone number always my own. I tried to cut left, away from the square, but no matter how many turns, how many alleys, how many desperate shortcuts through yards or driveways or abandoned parks, I always ended up back at the memorial. The benches, the blackened wreath, the carnations now drained of color, petals curled and crisped, as if every circuit I made stole a little more of life from them. Once, I glimpsed another runner, a step ahead. My shape, my gait, my old sweatshirt, But when I reached out to grab their shoulder, my hand passed through nothing but cold. I turned, and there, at the edge of the square, the gas station had replaced City Hall. My car was parked on the curb, door ajar, and headlights on. I stumbled to it, certain this was the last trap, but unable to stop myself. On the windshield, a new flyer, duct taped so tight I had to claw it off. It showed me, mid-stride, a blur of motion, with a crowd of faceless shadows looping after. Underneath, a single word: found. I tore the door open, climbed in, and started the engine. In the passenger seat, a shadow sat, arms folded, head cocked, waiting. I blinked, and it was gone. Or rather, it was replaced by the familiar ache in my left arm, a phantom pain that reminded me the scar had never really healed, just grown thin and mean. The engine caught, and I peeled away from the curb, tires shrieking a protest that echoed off every silent building. The GPS was back, its voice urgent now. Proceed, proceed, proceed to the route. I followed left, right, left, the only direction possible, as the streetlights collapsed behind me and the town rearranged itself for my exit. At the final turn, the edge of Portreel resolved into a single, endless straightaway. The streetlights blinked out one by one, except for the very last, which glowed blue and sick at the boundary of the fog. Beneath it stood a figure, a perfect mirror of me, hands in pockets, eyes bright and wet, lips set in a line I'd never quite mastered. I slowed as I passed, and the figure raised a hand, not in warning, but in a lazy, offhand wave, as if to say, "See you next time." The cold in the air finally broke, replaced by sweat, and I kept driving until the lights of the town became just another ghost in the rear view. I found the highway again, though for a while I doubted it was the original. The asphalt felt newer, almost soft under the tires, the road stripes fresh enough to sting in the headlights. Fog dropped away behind me in a single, abrupt curtain, and the sky, just a shade lighter than before, revealed the ordinary procession of semis and sedans, all oblivious to the night's peculiar rhythm. My phone rebooted itself with a little haptic burp. The GPS recalculated and spoke in its old, chipper monotone, as if the last few hours had been a technical glitch, a software hiccup the developers never planned for. Even the time on the dashboard jumped ahead, 2:19 a.m., but only after flickering for a breathless second to 3:17. I exited at the first gas station I found, a Quick Mart with fluorescent tubes that buzzed like angry wasps. I filled the tank, bought a bottle of water, and stood under the punishing light, watching other cars coast in and out, each one piloted by a face I could not quite see through the tinted glass. The world seemed flat, and the colors too honest. The cold gone, but replaced by a sticky sense of shame. Back in the car, I Googled the name of the town. Every premonition, every vowel swap, every possible typo. Nothing. No Portreel, no Portreel, no Portreel, not even a ghost entry on Wikipedia. I searched the coordinates from my GPS, but the map showed only a dead stretch of country highway, a place where the only points of interest were an abandoned quarry and a historical marker that led to a page not found. In the morning, I double-backed. The sun made everything fragile and tentative, and I half expected the night to reveal itself as a fugue, a nervous breakdown, a sleep deprivation hallucination. I retraced my route, each landmark less certain than the last, until I reached the place where the signs for Portreel should have been. There was nothing, not even an old post, not a scrape of litter, not a tire rut in the brush. The road that had led me in was a sheer wall of sumac and bramble, impassable even by foot. I stayed until noon, just to be sure, and then I drove until my eyes went raw. The next morning, in the strip mall parking lot, hundreds of miles away, I found a new flyer taped to my windshield. Missing, my face in triplicate, the number, a string of sevens, as if someone had held the key down in desperation. Below it, in neat block letters, found. I peeled it off, crumpled it, and tossed it in the trash. But when I glanced in the rear view, I saw another me, watching from the far end of the parking lot, hands deep in the hoodie pockets, waiting for me to try again. No matter how far I drive, no matter how many rest stops or cheap hotels or empty mornings, I sometimes see the shimmer of Portreel in the periphery. The edge of the sign, a fresh wreath, a flyer at the next gas station, promising I'll never really get away. The town is always waiting, its population sign ready to flip the number at the slightest provocation. Every now and then, I think I hear the GPS begin to recalculate, its voice a little bit more knowing, a little more resigned. I am the only population this place will ever need, until the next lost driver, the next unresolvable final, the next version of me or her or you. The rest is just repetition. The rest is just the route. And somewhere in the fog, the town is still waiting. The clocks are still stuck at 3:17. The reflections are still watching. The GPS is still whispering, proceed. If you enjoyed tonight's story, you can find more from Ethereal Echoes, new psychological thrillers released every Wednesday and Friday. And if you'd like to hear them early and without ads, you can join us on Patreon. For now, let the road fade behind you. Let the silence settle back in. And if you ever see a hand-painted sign that shifts in its own name in the headlights, whatever you do, don't turn down that street. Good night.